From crazy mages and legendary heroes to mysterious creatures, odd characters, funny moments, and pop culture references, there's so much to discover in the wild regions of the Sword Coast. The first Baldur's Gate is full of unique and exciting encounters. I'm Encrage, and today I'll show you some of the most interesting ones you can find during your adventures. The hunter we meet south of Beregost, Bubsnicht, who warns us about ogres lurking in the area, is actually a nod to Wolverine. The name Bub refers to the nickname Wolverine often used to address people, while Snicht is the iconic sound his claws make when they pop out. He also mentions that he can smell the ogres nearby, which is a clear reference to Wolverine's heightened senses. If you compliment Bub on doing a good job, he responds with the line, "You could say that. Ain't pretty though." This is a reference to one of Wolverine's most famous quotes.
Because I'm the best there is at what I do. But what I do best isn't very nice.
Just another cool little Easter egg that adds to the charm of the game. North of Nashkel, you can encounter a hermit with the delightfully melodic name, Portal Bendoviden, however it should be pronounced. When you meet him, he's already in quite a mood, frustrated by the endless stream of visitors asking him about the meaning of existence. If you decide to ignore his irritation and ask about your own fate, he'll first hit you with some sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek words of wisdom. Never take raisins from rabbits. Never spit in a man's face, unless his mustache is on fire. And don't wear wooden knickers unless you've got plenty of salve. If that doesn't satisfy you, you can unleash an absolutely epic rant, threatening to shove an object no smaller than Elminster and his hat into the hermit's nether regions. Seriously, this whole speech deserves to be framed. Check it out on screen now. Pure gold. Convinced by your, persuasive arguments, the hermit finally gives you some serious insight about your fate. At first, his words might seem cryptic and meaningless, but as you dive deeper into the story of your protagonist, they start to hit differently. The real gem lies in this sentence. Your coin is on its edge. That line is crucial because it ties directly into a book we stumble upon during our journey, The History of the Fateful Coin. In it, we learn about an old myth tied to Timora and Beshaba, goddesses of luck and misfortune. Old tales tell that luck plays a crucial role in each person's life. When each newborn baby enters into the realms, Timora flips a coin formed from the remnants of the original goddess of luck, Taish. Beshaba calls it in the air, the moon, heads, or the cloak, tails. If Beshaba is right, that person is cursed with misfortune for the rest of his or her days. If she's wrong, Lady Luck smiles on that child for the rest of his or her life. For some rare beings, the coin lands edge on, and these luckless few can forge their own fates, for they have more freedom over their destinies than the powers themselves. And that's exactly what the hermit is referencing. His words really start to resonate once you understand the entire journey of the protagonist. This is one of those little details that, in my opinion, makes Baldur's Gate 1 a truly legendary game. In the same region, we can run into an NPC named Lord Foreshadow. The name itself is a not-so-subtle hint. Foreshadow means to signal or hint at something to come, and that's precisely what this character does in a clever and indirect way. During your conversation, Lord Foreshadow casually mentions the city of Neverwinter. If you ask him whether he's from that distant city, he'll reply that he's actually from Waterdeep, but plans to visit Neverwinter soon, as he expects it to become quite popular in the near future. You can also tell him that you've heard of Neverwinter, but doubt whether the city even exists. In response, Lord Foreshadow quips that maybe it doesn't yet, but it will soon. A little reminder, Neverwinter Nights was released in June 2002, 3.5 years after the release of the first Baldur's Gate game. So, yes, this is some top-tier foreshadowing. If you ask Lord Foreshadow about news from the south, he mentions that he recently traveled to Athkatla. He even recommends that you visit the city yourself, as it's bound to become quite the hotspot in the near future. And, of course, Athkatla is the central hub of Baldur's Gate 2. This is a brilliant example of how the writers at BioWare skillfully dropped Easter eggs and teased their future projects within the game, rewarding attentive players with these subtle, self-referential nods. East of Beregost, we can stumble upon a drunkard who has, as he puts it, loshed on his way home. None of that matters to him though, because he demands we hand over all our money. Now, refusing him, though a tempting option, turns out to be the worst possible choice we can make. The man dramatically reveals his little secret that he's actually a lich, wielding powerful magic. Mercifully, he grants us one last chance to reconsider our foolishness and surrender all our gold. But if we're feeling particularly bold or foolish and refuse yet again, things take an unexpected turn. The supposed lich grows enraged, stumbles, and collapses unconscious on the ground. Turns out he wasn't a mighty lich after all, but just another drunk with a flair for theatrics. Or, who knows, maybe that sudden fainting spell saved us from a truly terrible fate. Better safe than sorry when dealing with self-proclaimed liches, I guess. Not far from fishermen Torlo and Chellen, we encounter a truly legendary figure, none other than Drist do Urden. Drist is perhaps one of the most iconic characters in the Forgotten Realms universe, created by Robert Anthony Salvatore. His story spans over 30 novels, making him a cornerstone of the setting's lore. Drist is a legendary drow from the Underdark, who rejected his people's ruthless culture to live a life of honor and compassion. A master swordsman wielding his signature scimitars, he roams the Forgotten Realms, battling injustice and seeking acceptance from the surface world. When we meet him, Drist asks for our help in defeating a group of gnolls pursuing him. However, it quickly becomes apparent that our assistance is more symbolic than necessary. Drist makes short work of his enemies, cutting them down with ease, even if we choose to stand aside and watch. Perhaps the drow was testing us, gauging whether we'd step in to help a stranger in need. For many players, Drist's appearance in Baldur's Gate is synonymous with his incredibly powerful gear. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, in the Enhanced Edition, the only way to acquire it is to defeat him in combat. A fair fight with Drist is a daunting, if not outright impossible, task for most parties in the game. His stats, skills, and equipment make him a near unstoppable force by the standards of the first Baldur's Gate. Over the years, players have devised increasingly creative and often ridiculous strategies to cheese the fight and claim Drist's gear. Whether it's luring him into traps, exploiting AI quirks, or even using summoned creatures to chip away at his health while keeping a safe distance, the battle against Drist has become something of a rite of passage for crafty adventurers. If we speak to him after the gnolls are dealt with, Drist offers some advice on handling the bandit threat in the region. For instance, he suggests infiltrating their ranks, a tactic that is indeed an option when we reach the bandit camp. Even in a brief encounter, Drist leaves a lasting impression, reminding us why he's such a beloved figure in Forgotten Realms lore. During our travels through the Sword Coast, we might come across a variety of traveling vendors. One of them can be found to the west of Nashkel, in a place known as the Xvart village. As soon as he spots us, he approaches, sizing up what he believes to be not-so-well-prepared adventurers, and offers us a deal on magical potions and scrolls at an unbeatable price. If we fall for this tempting offer, we'll soon find ourselves proudly owning cursed items. None of the magical items he sells actually work. Border is simply a fraud. Alternatively, rather than trading with him, we can take a more forceful approach and demand that he hand over all of his goods. This will lead to a fight, and while we may emerge victorious, our reward will once again be a collection of cursed items. Personally, I really enjoyed this interaction because, to be honest, the first time I completely fell for it, as a naive adventurer, ready to save the world, I absolutely believed in the merchant's honesty and just got totally scammed. It was a complete surprise that the creators decided to set up such a situation. A con artist selling us useless, broken goods. The area around the lighthouse has also attracted Arkashul, who will offer to read our palm using her gypsy magic. While such practices are often associated with fraud in our world, and many people don't believe in the magical abilities of fortune tellers like her, Arkashul definitely has genuine skills, as we will find out during the conversation. If we agree to her offer for a palm reading, Arkashul begins her spells and peers into our soul. After a moment, she releases our hand, terrified, telling us that we will live a happy life, asks for 10 gold pieces and immediately wants to end the conversation. This means that Arkashul has seen something in us, a connection to Baal. She glimpsed into our future, the future of the heir of the Lord of Murder, and whatever she saw must have frightened her. At this stage of our journey, we may still be unaware of our true origins, so we might press Arkashul, asking her what exactly she saw in our hands. However, if we do so, we need to be cautious, as Akashula, under pressure, will eventually crack and attack us. Undoubtedly, this encounter will give us plenty to think about. While traversing the area known as the Dryad Falls, east of the Knoll Fortress, we may encounter a little girl named Drienne. She presents us with a classically heroic task: to save her cat that fell from the top of the waterfall where we find her. When we descend the waterfall, we sadly discover that the poor cat didn't survive the fall. With a heavy heart, we return to Drienne to inform her of our discovery. Interestingly, her response and the fate of the cat varies depending on our level of reaction. With a reaction level of 15 or higher, the girl reacts surprisingly nonchalantly. She tells us that it's not a big deal that the cat is dead, and this isn't the first time it has happened. Thankfully, every time, her father brings the cat back to life. However, with a reaction level between 8 and 14, things take a more somber turn. Drienne is devastated, mourning her deceased cat, and even says she will give it a proper funeral. If our reaction level is 7 or lower, Drienne will accuse us of killing the cat and burst into tears. What is particularly intriguing about the first and second scenarios is that they suggest the fate of the cat depends on our reaction level. At a high level, the cat is revived and continues to roam the world, but at a lower level, the cat remains dead. While traveling south of Nashkel through the region known as Fireleaf Forest, we can encounter a very peculiar trio of monsters: a Svart, a Kobold, and a Tasloi. What's unusual about this group is that they are not hostile toward our party. Curious, we can initiate a conversation with the Kobold, who introduces himself as Larry and refers to the Ixvart and the Tasloi as his brothers, Daryl and the other brother Daryl. They are an Easter egg reference to the trio of brothers from the 1980s American sitcom Newhart, known as Do Anything for a Buck.
Hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. That's my other brother Daryl.
If we recognize them, we can ask for an autograph, and they will indeed provide one. We will then find a scroll with their signatures in our inventory. However, if we don't recognize the reference and ask why a Ixvart, Kobold, and Tasloi are roaming the wilderness calling themselves Larry, Daryl, and Daryl, Larry will reply that we are from the wrong generation. This essentially means that we're simply too young and missed the show when it originally aired. This encounter is particularly interesting as it is perhaps the most prominent Easter egg that directly references a piece of popular culture, in this case, an American TV series. During our travels through Fireleaf Forest, we may come across a young boy named Albert. He will ask for our help with an incredibly important mission. His dog, Rufy, has gone missing. Finding the dog isn't a huge challenge. Rufy can be found wandering around the area, and with the chew toy Albert gives us, the dog will follow us back to its owner. At first, this seems like a classic, somewhat cliched hero's task. Rescue my pet. But there's quite an interesting plot twist. Much like in the case of Drienne, the outcome of this quest might catch us off guard. After we return the dog to Albert, he will thank us and give us a small reward, before transforming into a demon and taking the dog to the 9 hells. Quite the twist indeed. Knowing this, it's worth paying attention to Albert's initial dialogue, particularly the parts where he mentions his relatives who are staying here with him, and how he's considering moving here one day. In another line, he also mentions that Rufy isn't used to such strange places and people. If, during our travels along the Sword Coast, we visit a carnival near Nashkel, we may encounter a very brief but humorous interaction. While strolling through the tents, we might be approached by Lord Binky the Buffon. He's probably a noble, dressed in very distinctive attire, bright, colorful clothing, and he has a glowing effect around him. The conversation is very short. Binky approaches us solely to insult us and criticize our outfit. If we respond at all, he'll mock us, repeating everything we say before calling us beggars and telling us to get lost. It's a small, insignificant encounter, but for me, Lord Binky is a symbol of what I love about the first Baldur's Gate. It's filled with these little random events and encounters. It's these kinds of moments that make the world feel alive and intriguing. At the carnival, we can also encounter a wizard named the Great Gazib, who is currently performing a show. His main attraction is his exhibit, an exploding ogre named the Amazing Upa. Gazib, much to the crowd's delight, will showcase his trick, repeatedly summoning the ogre, only for it to explode each time. However, on the third attempt, Upa will have had enough of the constant explosions and will turn aggressive, attacking us. Naturally, Gazib, like any responsible wizard in this situation, will quickly flee, leaving us to face the enraged ogre on our own. As we travel through the region known as Lonely Peaks, we encounter a group of bandits led by a man named Iowan Galshubhair. The interaction with him plays out as a classic wilderness bandit encounter. He accosts us, claiming we've wandered into their territory and now owe a fee for passing through. If we refuse to pay, a fight breaks out. If we agree, the bandits will take our money, mock us, but leave us alone afterward. There are two interesting facts associated with Iowan. The first is that near the Temple of Helm in Nashkel, we can find a tombstone bearing the inscription, Iowan o Galshubhair, Mea Gloria Fides. This ties directly into the second interesting fact. The bandit's name is actually a Celtic variation of John Gallagher, the lead artist for Baldur's Gate. The Latin motto on the tombstone, meaning, "The faith is my glory," is also the motto of the Gallagher clan. This clever Easter egg connects a character in the game to the real-life lead artist in a fun and subtle way. As we explore the peninsula known as Shipwreck's Coast, we may encounter a mysterious and beautiful woman named Shoal. She appears to resemble a nymph or dryad, and she approaches us asking for help. In return, she promises to show her gratitude by throwing herself into the arms of one of our companions to give them a kiss. However, regardless of whether we remain cautious and refuse the kiss from the beautiful maiden or accept it, Shoal will approach one of our party members and kiss them, which turns out to be a deadly kiss that leaves our companion dead. Shoal then becomes hostile and attacks us. After a brief fight and inflicting some damage on her, she will stop the battle, explaining that she doesn't want to fight us but is forced to do so by her master, an ogre mage named Droth. He controls her through a shawl, and as long as he possesses it, she must obey his commands. If we offer to help her, she will resurrect our fallen companion, and the ogre mage Droth will appear. If we try to force the ogre to give up the shawl and free Shoal, he will be surprised, claiming that he's not holding her captive and that they are actually collaborators. He will then attack us. If we win the fight, Shoal will quickly thank us and leave without further explanation, leaving us with many unanswered questions. Interestingly, Shoal is a representative of the Nereids, a race of aquatic fae related to the Tritons. Nereids were fae who were bound to the seas and oceans. They physically resembled Tritons except that their bodies displaced light, making them nearly transparent and hard to see, especially when they were in the water. It is worth noting that Shoal is the only known representative of the Nereid race encountered in the game, making her a very unique character, despite the fact that her storyline is relatively minor and not particularly significant. On Shipwreck's Coast, we can also encounter a character known as Arkand the Mad. As his name suggests, he is completely insane. He asks us, in his twisted and erratic way, to help him by retrieving something hidden on a nearby pirate shipwreck on the shore. However, he doesn't specify what exactly we should look for, but immediately warns us not to wear whatever we find. Sure enough, when we search the wreck, we find a ring. If we manage to identify it before returning it to Arkand, we quickly understand why his advice to avoid wearing it was so important. The ring is a cursed discipliner, and putting it on causes us to lose our sanity completely, rendering us so mentally impaired that we can't even move. Once we return the ring to Arkand, he thanks us and, in gratitude, gives us an oil of fiery burning, a useful item for combat. The combination of the mad gnome, the shipwreck, and the cursed ring strongly reminds me of the scene from The Lord of the Rings, where Gollum finds the One Ring. This might have even been a conscious reference to The Return of the King, published in 1955, considering the parallels between the two scenarios. In the dried-up riverbed that once flowed beneath Firewine Bridge, we encounter a sorceress named Karsa. From the start of the conversation, it's clear something is deeply wrong with her, as she is clearly hearing voices in her head. As we try to learn more, Karsa explains that she was part of an adventuring party that recently traveled through the area and came across the Firewine ruins. There, they discovered a mysterious jar, which brought madness upon the entire group, causing them to turn on each other. Karsa is the sole survivor of the massacre that took place in the ruins. She walked away alive, but took the jar with her. Since then, she has been hearing voices in her head, urging her to speak a name, promising great rewards in return. However, she struggles with this urge and refuses to utter the name. We can offer to take the jar from her and deal with it ourselves. Karsa is reluctant to part with it. However, if we press her long enough, regardless of whether we wish to help her or just claim the artifact for ourselves, she will eventually say the name, Kark. This summons her death, and in her place, a powerful ogre mage appears. The ogre mage is a formidable and terrifying opponent, capable of bringing swift death to many. With the right preparation and strategy, though, our party can defeat him and rid the world of the evil that the ogre mage could have unleashed. Sadly, Karsa does not survive this encounter. In the depths of the Sword Coast, to the far east of Baragost, in a region known as Red Wizard Forest, we can encounter 4 Red Wizards of Thay named Denak, Diana, Brendan, and Lasala. Interestingly, the outcome of the encounter with them depends on whether we have Edwin in our party. If Edwin is traveling with us, Denak, the leader of the wizards, will address him directly and reference his mission, which is, of course, to kill Dynahair. After the conversation, the 4 red wizards will leave. However, if Edwin is not in our party, the conversation will unfold very differently. The wizards will inform us that we've encountered them at a very inconvenient time. They do not want to be noticed by anyone, and because of this, they have no choice but to kill us. Regardless of how we handle the conversation, it will always end in a fight. In the Cloakwood Forests, deep inside one of the caves, we can meet Peter from the north, who introduces himself as a woodsman. He happens to be exploring the cave for some reason. If we start questioning him a bit, expressing doubt about what exactly a woodsman is doing in a cave, he'll begin to explain in a very convoluted and odd manner. Eventually, he'll get tangled up in his own words, admit to his lies, and confess that he is actually working for a band of thieves. His mission was to tame wyverns, so that the bandits could use them for their own malicious purposes. But what's really interesting is the sheer number of comments he makes regarding wood-related activities, exploring natural caverns, and beating around the bush. These could easily be interpreted as suggestive or having double meanings. Additionally, his name, Peter from the North, seems like a playful reference to the real-world adult film actor Peter North, which adds an extra layer of humor and irreverence to the encounter. So that's it for today's episode. Huge thanks to everyone who made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. In the near future, I'm planning to release more Baldur's Gate content. I'd love to make a second part focused on more encounters in the wilds of the Sword Coast, as well as cover plenty of other interesting details that deserve their own episodes. Let me know what you think about this one, and see you next time.